Hey, everybody, welcome to another Practical Pet Chat. It is great to see you. We know how busy you are. We also know how much you love your pets. So, Lauren, let's hit them with this one because I really am constantly finding myself in these conversations about my vet didn't do this or my vet doesn't do that. And it really sparked something that you and I have talked about in so many different ways that I just wanted to hit it direct this time. And that is expectations on your veterinarian have got to be reset, in my opinion. And you and I have recently talked about communicating on behalf of your pet. You've shared, I've shared how we chose our vets. And when I ask those things of others, they haven't necessarily done that. They just found the vet and just for some reason expect that all vets are not just there for the medical side, but they're there for the nutrition side, the behavioral side, the training side, the spiritual side, whatever else. That's just not realistic.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting that I see in a lot of groups on social media, people will say, um, I need a vet. Who do you recommend? If it were only that easy that every vet was a cookie cutter vet, it just doesn't go that way. And I've had conversations with clients of my own where they'll bring me their paperwork after a vet visit and they've been administering antibiotics to their animal, but they can't tell me why. There's no test results, there's no infection, there's no reason for it. And I go, well, did you ask? And they're like, well, no. And I go, okay, so you might want to start looking around and see what else is out there. But I love my vet. I understand they're great. Yeah, you love take them to lunch, something like that. But I don't know that that's the criteria for having a vet administering things and recommending things for your animal. And a good example of that is I used to send people to an emergency room for after hours. And there was always a vet that worked there. And he has unfortunately since passed away, but he was really grumpy. I mean, really grumpy. And he was short and abrupt. And people would come in and they tell me what happened. I go, oh, who did you see? Well, I saw Dr. XYZ. Oh my gosh, I love him. And they're like, you do? I go, I do. And they're like, why? And I go, because he's a great vet. I don't care that he doesn't have a bedside manner. The animal doesn't care either, by the way, and I don't care that he doesn't hold my hand and give me platitudes and, tell me all the things he thinks I want to hear. I want him, it's an emergency situation. Because it's emergent, I want him to be focused on the animal, asking me questions. If I veer off of the direction of what he's looking for, he yanks me right back, goes, okay, that's not what I asked you. In this situation, and yes, people may get upset or they may get offended or they may get their feelings hurt. Get over it. This is a life or death situation. That's why you're in an emergency room. And they just look at me dumbfounded. And it's like you have to really remember what you're there for. So, when you go into a vet, I've talked about this before. I screen vets before I go to them. I'll set an appointment with an office call and I'll go in. I probably won't bring an animal. And if I do, I'm usually holding on to the animal the entire time because I'm not really there to be seen. I want to talk to the vet. I want to get a feel for the vet. I want to know what they do in certain situations. How do they feel about what I feed? How do they feel about, vaccinations? Do they recommend them? Because I've seen vets recommend them every 6 months, or do they recommend them once a year? Do they, what's their protocol on that? What do they recommend for flea and tick? How do they feel about my perspectives on those things? Are they going to be short with me? Are they just going to be dismissive? Are they going to tell me, well, if you feed this way, if you don't do what I recommend, then you might as well go somewhere else. Let's get that out of the way now before I'm in here with a situation. So 95% of the time that has worked out in my favor because I do a little, research first. And I will look vets up to see, if there's been any vet review board types things on them, or any, it's not just about things like reviews, because you know how that goes for everything. So I want to know if there's been anything historically, any lawsuits, have they been put up on the review board? Have they been admonished or gotten in any trouble? And if all of that is clean, then it's, what can I find out about the vet? How long have they been in business? How long have they been a vet? Where did they go to school? You can find a wealth of information. So I do all that before I make the appointment. When I make the appointment, I go in, I have a list of topics or questions that are important to me. I invite them to ask me things. And hopefully we come out of that with a booked appointment from there, and they become my vet. That's worked out really well for me.
I love a couple things you said there, but one thing I want to maybe give a different approach to. So I do the same as you. I'll book an appointment when I'm looking for a new vet. I actually do bring at least one of my dogs with me. And the reason for that is they just have a better sense. And if they're not happy in the office because they're smelling smells, they're feeling off, whatever, I've gotten that tick off from them where it's like, hey, dad, this ain't the place for me. I don't like this place. Let me get the hell out. As opposed to if I see they're calm, oh, okay, good. The environment's right. No different than I'll tell people all the time when they're like, hey, I'm trying to find a new doctor. I'm trying to find a new dentist, whatever it may be. And I'll be like, stop by when you don't have to be there. If you don't like being there when you don't have to be there, that's not the place for you. So I do. So I will bring my pet with me. And I just also too, it's like they just have an extra sense of like, and I want to see how they react. But I love one of the other things that you said too was you want to talk to them, you want them to understand your approach, your philosophy, the way that you manage your pets. And I like that because wouldn't it be great if everybody, instead of an about us page, had an about our philosophy page? And they really just laid out everything that they feel they're strong in too. One of the good things that I've experienced is I have had some vets say to me, this is not in alignment with my philosophy. And I'm actually grateful to them because I'm like, perfect, not a problem. And I get it because I do like herbal supplements. I do like, adding in real and raw foods, etc. So if that's not your bailiwick, let's know now so that we're not butting heads. So I'd love, it's like, hey, tip to all our vets watching this. You may think it might eliminate some people. I think it will draw more people in because when I do see those, I get really sparked. And what's great is too, not everybody's like me, right? So when I'm getting my friends asking me, there's a lot of friends I have that I know my vet should not be their vet because they don't align with my vet the way that I align with my vet. And so I think that's something there too. But yeah, I just
Great
I like that.
for that. I mean, I'm already looking towards that.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be some alignment. And as for how my dog would react in a vet's office, I had two vets before we moved here that I had for years, and absolutely adore both of them, and I'm still friends with both of them. And not a single animal of mine didn't shake when they went there. And these kids were never out of my sight, never had been treated with anything but, kindness. There's none of that, those smells. There's none of, because again, integrative holistic vets, there's no, there's none of that major stress that you hear sometimes in the waiting room coming out from the back, that kind of thing. They're in a new environment and they're going to shake. So I don't count on
and
my
and you know their personality, so it's not a negative reaction to the environment, it's a reaction to the change.
right. That's exactly
Yeah,
right. But
yeah,
but for listing viewpoints. So, there's a trend that, seems to have I think lessened a little bit, or maybe it's because of where I live now. But for a while there were a lot of vets saying that they practiced holistic modalities.
Oh
And
yeah.
then, because they want that bit of the business that they think they're missing, right? And I've had customers come in and they go, "Oh yeah, they're a holistic vet." And I'm like, "No, they're not." And they're like, "No, yeah, they are. It even says that they are." And I go, "What holistic remedy modality, what type of treatment were you suggested that was holistic in any way?" And then as I'm talking to them, they were recommended this, that, the other, none of which were holistic. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what that means. And people using that as a marketing term is not a good thing either. So I really think it falls on the pet parent to dig in and figure that stuff out. The problem is we don't know what to ask. People go to the vet and they're intimidated by the white coat, much like they are in their own doctor's offices. They're intimidated by the position and stature of the person that they're going to see. Maybe they can't get in, they don't have many vets in their area, have waited a while to get into this vet, don't want to piss them off, don't want to say the wrong thing, any of that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, independent contractor, this vet is just like anybody that you're contracting with to get a service from, and you need to go and fill them out. I'm not saying you need to be their best friend, but you need to be sure that the services they offer are going to fit your needs and your desires. And going in with your hat in hand, willing to just be a bobblehead and agree to anything is not in your animal's best interest. The numbers of times I've told people that, they're like, "I just don't want them to take my kid in the back." Well, did you tell them that? Well, no. Oh, okay. So that's their norm because lots of parents freak out and don't handle it well. So their normal is to take the kid out of the sight of the parents. So did you tell them you don't want your dog or your cat to be treated outside of your purview? Because that's a big red flag for me. Now, it would be different if there's an x-ray because the law typically is that, they have to take them for an x-ray. But outside of that, everything should be able to be done in front of you. I've had animals given, urinary catheters to get, urinalysis. I've had blood drawn from the carotid arteries. I've held my kids so that they could do that because none of that makes me squeamish and I don't freak out. But a lot of times, if you're not communicating, we talked about this before, communication is everything and it needs to be a two-way street. And vets don't communicate a lot either, oftentimes, because some vets, part of the reason that they're in the animal field is because maybe they don't do well with humans, and so it's an awkward situation for some of them as well. I mean, we're all just people when it comes down to it. And getting intimidated because of someone's position is counterintuitive to achieving what you need.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I like about what you said too is you have multiple vets. We've talked about that in terms of if one's not available, but also the specialist side of it. And I think that's that other thing in resetting expectations. I hear that a lot. And I know I just had some dental work done for Bella. And we were proactive on it, so not reactive. So had an interesting experience. But then I had, as I was sharing that with some of my other folks, they were like, "Oh my gosh, I had this," and sharing all these stories with differing, feelings about it and how things went. And one of the things that I asked was, "How did you find that?" And it was like, "Well, I, just asked my current vet." Okay. Well, you must really, really trust your vet then to do that.
Specialist?
Yeah, to go to the dental specialist. And they're like, "Well, how did you find it?" And I was like, "I looked and asked around. I got a list of about seven different specialists all within a half hour, which was my criteria. And then I called each of their offices and, I talked to them. They were gracious enough to give me 10, 15 minutes, in some cases, even more time to really go through. Here's why I'm doing it. Here's what I'm looking to accomplish. What's your philosophy? I, in particular, I wanted to make sure on This is a whole great episode that we'll do later on at some point about dental. But in my opinion, because I was being proactive, I didn't feel that there should be a lot of teeth at risk for Bella. I do a lot of work myself with different tools and all the rest of it. So, and it was interesting talking because I did have one who was like, "Oh, I've seen all that. That makes no difference. You know, what's going to happen? I know, I can tell you right now." And I was like, "Yeah, you're not the guy for me. You haven't even met my dog, let alone you're already telling me all the reasons why you're going to be, yeah, sorry." But the point on that was, you know, you've got to have, in some cases, different vets for different specialties. And again, the best time to find something is when you don't
You don't
have
need.
to, yeah, when you don't have to immediately act on it. And so, yeah, I like what you're calling out there as well. I think that that's something that not enough people do.
Well, I don't think it's wrong to ask your vet for a specialist recommendation, but
Not at all. Yeah.
that's one of several. My issue is that when people ask their neighbor, their friend, their coworker, who do you use for a vet? I will always ask people, why do you like them? What in particular makes you like that vet? Why do you continue to go to that vet? How many times have you been to that vet? Because I want their feedback on why they think this is a great vet. But most people don't do that. They're like, oh, my neighbor uses vet so and so down the street, and they go there, and then they just turn their kid right over to them. And for me, it's more of a this is my heartbeat at my feet, and it's everything to me to make sure that they're given the best care that they can get. So it's not a casual conversation. I just had a dental experience too, and it took me more than a year to find a vet because of different circumstances. But, I was searching and I was willing to drive hours away because I have little dogs and they have horrendously bad teeth. And they're very young and it's
Right.
genetic. But, I ended up finding not too far from me a board certified veterinary dental specialist with a board certified anesthesiologist, veterinary anesthesiologist on staff. And it was extremely expensive and worth every penny. And I had a meeting ahead of time. And I mean, I ask all the questions that, they tell me, they said, we don't get people in here that ask the kind of questions you do. And I said, well, I need to know that. What kind of anesthesia do you give? What do you give for recovery? What kind of pain meds do you give? Do you give antibiotics on board? Do you use any fluoride? You know, um, a number of questions, and they were great about it, really great. And they had their entire staff in there for it. And if you're not getting that type of respect, and maybe you don't want it, maybe you're the kind of person that's like, I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to do the research. I don't want to know. Then find somebody that is well rated overall. But if you really want to be sure that you're getting the right person and the right fit, you need to do a little bit of research and ask some questions.
Right. How many times do you and I go back to, you've got to do some research? And I know many of you out there are doing that. We're not saying you're not, but for those that maybe are, getting to know Lauren and I for the first time, really important, something that we always talk about. You're the advocate, you're the parent, you're the overseer, and at the end of the day, you're the decision maker, not anybody else. They're influencing your decisions, but they should not be the decision maker. You should be, your pet more than anybody. Lauren, any last thoughts before we wrap
I mean,
this
part of,
episode?
part of why you want to do research and you can't get comfortable with it is because I thought I found somebody just a few months ago. I did some research. I was in a hurry, did some research, doing some other things at the same time, and they had great reviews online. And I made an appointment. And at the very last minute before I think it was a week before I was to keep the appointment, I was like, you know what I didn't do? Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't do any investigation with the vet board uh,
Mm,
to see. This person had lost their license not once but twice.
No,
And
no.
I was sick to my stomach. I came out, I'm sure I was white as a sheet. And my husband looked at me and goes, "What happened?" And I just handed him my phone. He's like, "Oh my God, is that the vet we're supposed to see next week?" I said, "We will never see this vet."
Not anymore. Not after
Oh,
that revelation.
he's like, "Oh my God, how come you didn't see that before?" I said, "Because I didn't finish doing my research." And I went off of reviews and I had called over there and they had a great person on the phone. And I said it occurred to me I hadn't done this piece of it. And when I found it, it was right there on the internet. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So research people, I know it's hard, but it is so worth it.
Wow, that is way to
Right.
end this. That is so great. Expectations and research. Reset those. But wow, that is that's crazy. I have
What's
not
crazy
had that.
is they lost their license once and a second time, and they have it back again.
Yeah, that's wow.
Third.
I have not encountered that. So, but that's why you and I have these conversations, right? So I don't have to encounter everything. And hopefully all of you out there are feeling the same way. If you've had some of those unique experiences, please remember you can share them with us privately, or we're happy to share it with the group. Send us an email. Uh, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Reach out to us on all those social media channels. Lorin, it is always so great. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Can't wait to see you again here on Practical Pet Chats.
Thanks, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.